Have you ever read something, maybe in the Bible or another text that just stops you cold? Something really shocking.
Oh, absolutely. Texts that are unsettling, right?
Right. And it makes your heart kind of pound, makes you wonder if you've misunderstood, well, everything you thought you knew about faith, maybe, or justice.
Mm-hmm. Those moments are challenging.
Well, today we're diving into a verse from the Bible that definitely does that. It's Psalm 137, verse 9. And it says, "Blessed is he who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks."
Yeah, that's a tough one. Really tough.
Tough is an understatement, right? I mean, the immediate reaction for most of us, I think, is just visceral, like a physical recoil.
It is. It's deeply uncomfortable.
And you can see how it might make some people just scoff, you know? And even for believers, it's deeply troubling. It really makes you ask, does the Bible actually, like, promote violence? Does it command something as horrific as stoning children?
That's the core question people wrestle with when they hit verses like this.
So our mission today really is to take a deep dive into this specific challenging passage. We want to try and unpack its historical context, the literary style it uses, and maybe find its deeper spiritual meaning, to figure out why it's even there and what it truly signifies.
And it's fascinating, isn't it, how just one verse pulled out of its world can cause such a strong reaction, such deep misunderstandings, really.
Sure.
So to get it, we absolutely need to step back in time, like way back,
Yeah.
to a specific, really harrowing moment, 586 BCE.
Okay. What's happening then?
Well, you have to picture the sheer brutality of the Babylonian Empire invading Judah. I mean, Jerusalem is literally burning. The temple, the sacred center, is destroyed.
Total devastation.
Utter devastation. There was widespread slaughter, people being enslaved. It was a period of just unimaginable horror.
And the sources we have, they paint an even more, gut-wrenching picture, don't they? There's that detail from 2 Kings.
Ah, yes, King Zedekiah.
Right.
Yeah.
His own children were killed right before his eyes, and then, as if that wasn't enough horror, his eyes were gouged out.
It's almost unthinkable cruelty. It just underscores the terror these people face.
Yeah.
And remember, thousands of people from Judah weren't just defeated. They were physically dragged away,
Yeah.
forced into captivity, into exile in Babylon.
Strangers in a strange land.
Exactly. And this psalm, Psalm 137, it was written by one of those exiles, someone weeping. The first verse says it all. By the rivers of Babylon, we sat and wept when we remembered Zion.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that context is everything.
It's critical. So when we get to verse 9, the one that shocks us, we have to understand first and foremost, this isn't some kind of theological instruction manual.
It's not a commandment.
No. Unequivocally, it's a cry. It's the raw, emotional outburst of a heart that has been completely shattered by suffering and injustice on a scale we can barely imagine.
Okay, so you say it's a cry. That's a powerful word. But what does that mean exactly in terms of how we should read it? Because, someone could hear cry and still think, but the words are calling for murder. Is it promoting violence?
No, absolutely not. And that's where understanding the type of writing is key. It's a complete misreading, really, of the genre.
Genre. So this is a specific kind of psalm.
Yes. This falls into a category theologians call an imprecatory psalm. Imprecatory. It sounds technical, but it just means psalms, where the writer is basically lamenting and appealing directly to God for justice against their enemies.
Ah, appealing to God, not calling for human action.
Precisely.
Yeah.
They're expressing profound grief, yes, and also that very human desire for divine retribution, for things to be made right. But here's the crucial distinction, the absolute key. The psalmist is not taking revenge themselves.
Okay.
And they're not commanding anyone else to do it either. They're pouring out their pain, their agony, and pleading with God to be the one who exacts justice. Pleading for God to act because of the atrocities committed against them.
So it's like saying, God, you see this horror, you deal with this.
Exactly. It's a prayer, a desperate prayer for divine intervention, a recognition that ultimate justice belongs to God. It's absolutely not a human call to arms.
Okay, that distinction is huge, placing the action entirely in the divine realm. But still, even understanding it's a cry, a plea to God, the words themselves, dash the infants against the rocks. It's so incredibly violent, so visceral. What are we missing about the language being used? It's easy to get stuck on the literal meaning.
Right, and that's where we need to think about literary devices. This isn't prose history or legal code, it's poetry. And Psalm 137.9 is a really powerful example of Hyperbole.
Hyperbole. Okay, like exaggeration for effect.
Exactly. Extreme exaggeration used for emphasis or to convey the depth of an emotion. It's not meant to be taken literally, word for word, as an instruction. It's about conveying the sheer magnitude of the feeling.
Like when someone has a terrible week at work and says, I'm just drowning in paperwork.
Perfect example.
They don't mean they're literally underwater.
Of course not. Or if you skip breakfast and say, I'm starving. You're not literally dying of hunger, but it conveys that intense feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. It gets the point across forcefully.
That's what the psalmist is doing here. This verse is like an emotional explosion. It's verbalizing the absolute depth of their despair, the trauma, the longing for justice that feels as extreme as the violence they witnessed. It's the language of a shattered heart crying out for God's vengeance on those who committed such horrors. Yeah. It's not a literal directive for human action.
An emotional explosion that frames it very differently. It acknowledges the horror without making it a command. Okay, but then how does this raw expression, this desire for divine retribution, fit with, say, the teachings we find later in the New Testament, with Jesus? Because it feels like there's a significant shift there.
That's a really important connection to make. If we look at the bigger biblical picture, Jesus' teachings often mark a profound departure from that eye for an eye kind of mentality, sometimes seen in human reactions to injustice.
He takes a different path.
A radically different path. He consistently taught love, forgiveness, not vengeance. Think about Matthew 5.44, right? Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you.
That's pretty much the opposite of dashing infants against rocks.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Or think about Luke 23.34. Jesus, while actually suffering unimaginable injustice on the cross, prays, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Wow. Yeah. That contrast is stark.
It really paints a different picture, doesn't it? Where the understandable human inclination, especially after trauma like the exile, might cry out for retribution. You hurt us. You hurt our children. You must suffer equally. Jesus points towards healing that pain, offering grace even to those who inflict the suffering.
It's a shift towards restoration, maybe, instead of just retribution.
I think that's a good way to put it. And this really brings us back to the core message we see developing throughout the biblical narrative regarding, human suffering and God's justice.
So if we bring this ancient cry, this ancient psalm into our lives today, what are the takeaways for us? Now, if you're listening and you've ever felt completely broken, maybe been a victim of deep injustice, what does this passage say?
Well, first, I think it says your pain is seen, it's understood. The Bible, even in its rawest, most difficult passages like this one, acknowledges that gut-wrenching human anguish. It doesn't shy away from it.
It gives space for that cry.
Yes, but it also, and this is crucial, reiterates a vital principle found elsewhere. Personal revenge isn't the path. Romans 12.1 is incredibly clear on this.
What does that say again?
It says, do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. Some translations might phrase it like, do not sin in your anger. But the core is, vengeance belongs to God.
So leave it to God. That reinforces that ultimate justice. The final balancing of the scales belongs to the divine. It's a message about trust, isn't it? And maybe relinquishing that burden of needing to exact revenge ourselves.
Precisely. It's a hard message sometimes, especially when you're hurting, but it's consistent.
Yeah. It feels like an important reminder. While our human hearts might ache for that immediate, maybe even violent justice, the ultimate weight of that isn't ours to carry. So the true message here, when we really dig deep, understanding the history, the poetry, the plea to God, Psalm 137.9 isn't this terrifying verse promoting violence after all.
No. Instead, it becomes this profound testament, a testament that God hears even the deepest, most anguished, maybe even the most ugly cries of humanity when they're utterly broken.
Yeah.
And that ultimately, he is the final arbiter of justice.
So we started with a verse that probably made your heart pound, right? A verse that just on the surface seems horrifying, seems to advocate for the unthinkable. Mm-hmm. But hopefully through this deep dive, looking at where it came from, how it was written, and seeing it through the lens of the New Covenant too, hopefully you can see it differently now, transformed maybe into this really profound expression of human pain and the hope for divine justice.
And maybe a final thought to sort of ponder on is this. How might understanding the sheer depth of that ancient cry for justice, how might that change how we view our own moments of pain, our own desires for retribution maybe? Especially knowing that our ultimate hope lies in a God who sees, who hears, and who promises to act with both perfect justice and perfect mercy.
That's a powerful question to sit with. It really is. Remember, your pain is heard. And ultimately, you can place your trust in a higher power to handle justice.
Hmm.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.